"What is she filming?" asked Leanne, hoping that he would know. He didn't. "They're in Pennsylvania somewhere, I think," he said, trying to recall the exact location. "We have to know where they are, but not what they are doing there. They're very secretive about that sort of thing, Leanne. There are publicity tabloid hounds who can show up and ruin a shoot. They don't need that." He regarded her carefully. "And of course, anything you see or hear stays here, young lady. I don't have to tell you that, do I?" "No, sir," she demurred, ashamed at her own nosiness. "Well then, that's settled, as far as I can see. When can you start with us?" She checked her calendar, an act that impressed Jefferson Rosen. She put it back in her purse and looked up into his still smiling face. "How does tonight sound?" she asked him. "Yes, but first I need to show you how to operate the cameras. Do you have a minute to observe here in the mock-up simulator?" "Sure," she said, feeling the thrill of her new job settling in. "I have all day." She followed him into the room and watched in fascination as he began to show her the wonders of the modern security closed-circuit camera. Bethany Pamela Bishop was a great personal manager, but she was secretive and never showed her true feelings. This bothered Janey to the point that she considered replacing her a couple of times. She never had a real reason to get rid of Bethany, except her admitted sapphism, but Janey didn't think Bethany would try anything with her. She was too stuck on Janey to foul up her inner circle relationship with the actress. Maybe it was vanity on Janey's part that kept Bethany around. Women like to do that, Janey was sure. Women like to be lusted after without ever having to come across with the goods and services. Women enjoyed watching people, especially other women, squirm. It was their way. Cruelty comes natural to women. It was Janey's way, and from time to time she would rag on Bethany about that old lesbianism boogaboo. She'd hit her with that "have you been sinning again, young lady?" crap, just to watch her flinch. It gave Janey a holier-than-thou attitude to be so high and mighty. After all, Janey did not sin like that. She didn't lust for another woman's body. That was satanic, or something like it. That was evil. It was a lot like Janey's mother had done to her, now that she thought about it. A lot like her fundamentalist mother, God rest her. "You haven't been doing that again, have you?" her mother would yell into her open bedroom while young Janey would be changing or dressing for school. Janey hated when her mother did that. Her younger sister down the hall would surely hear her mother's loud voice and her big mouth as she accused Janey of impure acts in the privacy of her own bedroom with her own body. "No, Mother," Janey would lie, her face burning bright crimson with shame and her eyes cast down at the floor, afraid of her mother's stare. "Don't you lie to me, girl," her mother would invariably shriek. "You know you are not too big." "Yes, Mother," Janey would agree, and God help little Janey if her mother ever got the goods on her, or found evidence. That would be the end. Janey would never be too big to get beat, as far as her mother was concerned. "Well, hey, so I am my mother," thought Janey as she finished packing, But at least now I understand the perverse thrill Mother got out of hounding me about playing with myself. I get off hounding Beth about her lesbianism. Hey, a thrill is a thrill, ain't it? What the heck? Bethany really doesn't mind me doing it. Not like I minded Mom hounding me. How do you figure? Asked a voice inside of her. Well, Bethany likes me, and I hated my mother. Simple as that. Bethany takes it because I want her to have it. Somewhere deep inside, she loves it. That's bull, said her inner voice. Janey finished packing and stood up. Her inner voice had never given her any grief before. Janey's little immoral ways had never bothered her at all. What was this all of a sudden? It's my turn, Janey continued. I relieve the abuse that was inflicted on me by abusing Bethany. I don't have a problem with that. I simply transfer the hurt. And Bethany enjoys pain. She's a dyke. Dykes like it to hurt. They're into pain. You are no better than your mother, Janey, said that inner voice. Hey, who are you anyway? Janey asked herself. Where did you come from? You know who I am, said the voice, and it's not nice to hurt Bethany like you do, Janey Knight. Who are you to judge me? She asked herself. Bethany admitted she came here to make me like her, so what do I owe her? Common decency. She respects you enough to tell you how she feels. Just because being that way is wrong doesn't make you perfect. She deserves your respect, if not your love. And then it dawned on Janey Knight. She was not talking to herself at all. She was talking to Rachel Blackwelder. She was conversing with the Rachel in her mind. Hey, lady, said Janey, what do you know about any of this? Silence met her argument. Answer me, said Janey, offended at having her thoughts interrupted. What do you know about me? The door opened slowly behind her. Bethany poked her head inside, her eyes wide. Who are you talking to? Asked Bethany. Nobody, said Janey flatly. Me. I'm talking to me, Bethany. Bethany seemed amused by this. Oh, she said. Are you getting anywhere? No, said Janey, a blush creeping on her face. Janey hated blushing. That was her sign that her mother had embarrassed her. There was an old hate of hers in blushing. It's okay, Jay, said Bethany. Everybody talks to himself, sometimes. Even I do it. Janey looked at her and smiled. Shame entered her features. Thanks, she said. I'll be down in a minute. Bethany went out and closed the door. Janey listened and heard nothing. No Rachel in reply. No thoughts like a woman like Rachel would have. Janey sniffed and went back to folding her clothes. Satisfied, thought Janey as she started crying. No. Oh, Rachel again. Why not? Asked Janey. You're a spoiled little brat, Janey Knight, said Rachel inside. You need a hair-brushing. You want her love and help, and yet you abuse her. You lay around naked to tempt her, and you— I do not, said Janey. She sniffed her tears in. You hound her about her sexual preferences, threatening to kick her out if she slips. You mistreat her, and yet you don't dare stop to think where you'd be without her, do you? You have no one else, you witch. Wise up and face it. If she leaves you, you're screwed. You can't smack your butt with both hands, Janey Knight, without Bethany Bishop, and you know it. Janey was bawling by this time. Get your head out of your butt and listen to me, said Rachel. I know why you do it, but your mother is not any excuse. She died lonely and old and without you. Do you want to die like that? Sure, Bethany loves you. She loves you enough to resist making love to you and driving you away from her. She loves you enough to eat the crap you throw at her. She loves you more than anyone has ever loved you, and that includes that prima donna sister of yours. It is quite clear to me that you had better be good to Bethany, for your own good. Bethany has stayed, Janie, despite you. But if you keep on, one day she'll get enough. One day, you just wait and see, little miss. One day you'll be on your own." Janie felt punished, and for the first time in her life, rightly so. She got up on her bed and started crying hard, harder than she had for a long time. The door opened slowly again, and Bethany, almost fearfully, came into the room. She saw her Manny G balled up on the bed, crying, and she went cautiously over to her. Bethany feared getting too close to Janie because she might lash out at the invasion of privacy. That was the way it was with these temperamental actresses. They were a lot like lesbians, manic depressives in drag. "Can I come over and hold you?" asked Bethany. "I see you're hurting." Janie shook her head no, and Bethany waited. "No, it's me, Bethany. I'm sorry, honey. Come over here, please." Bethany waited, and then went over and allowed herself to be taken into the tight, grasping hug of Janie Knight. It felt good and yet uncertain. What was she proving by this? Bethany wondered. Janie kissed Bethany's forehead and held her, tears streaming onto Bethany's face. "I've hurt you, Beth," said Janie. "On purpose. I wanted to hurt you. It made me feel good." "I know," said Bethany. Her own voice creaked a little. "What?" asked Janie, in surprise. "I know you did," said Bethany. "That's why I let you do it. I let you hurt me." "But why?" "It's no more than your biggest fan would do," said Bethany. "It's no more than that." "I don't understand," Janie began, and Bethany looked up at her, her eyes misting over. "Have you ever seen a faithful puppy dog being abused?" asked Bethany, and Janie winced at the imagery. "You just watch him get kicked and hit, and he sits there taking it, whimpering a little but not daring to move. He just—" She bit her lip and her eyes spilled over. "He just sits there and doesn't even try to get away." Janie was bawling again. Bethany stared at the ceiling. She was thinking about how she had not even realized the abuse until now. Sure, Bethany had been allowed to manage Janie in her time. Bethany had yelled at Janie before and had demanded she do this or that for the sake of her career. But the hurt that Janie liked to inflict on patient, suffering Bethany Bishop went virtually unnoticed. That hurt wasn't important. It wasn't important that Janie didn't allow Bethany to share in the big old house that Janie lived in by herself. It wasn't important that Janie didn't take Bethany to parties with her, nor show her to her professional friends. It was not important that Bethany had feelings and needs too, despite her former lifestyle. Nothing was important but Janie Knight and her career. Everything else was not important. "I hate my guts," Janie blubbered into Bethany's head. Despite herself, Bethany laughed. It was funny in a tragic way. "You ought to hate your own guts, you old, cold, worthless piece of fish meat," chuckled Bethany to herself. No, Bethany wasn't like that, though. She couldn't harbor a grudge. But she could enjoy the one that Janie was whipping herself with right now. She could love that. "Why don't you stop it right now, then?" asked Bethany. "Stop mistreating me, and I'll forgive you, if you want to do right by me. I was hoping you'd come around before long." Janie looked at her funny. "The pleasure I got from being around you," said Bethany flatly, "outweighed the pain of your insensitivity. I loved what you do for me, I guess. I was also mistreated by my old lady, in a verbal, cold way. I'm used to eating crap, and you weren't much different than her. Anyway, I've learned how to be tough. But the hurt, well, it never does go all the way away." Janey listened and felt badly. All daughters, she knew now, had motherly gripes. All daughters are secretly envied and admired and hated by their mothers. How they are structured personality-wise might save them later on, but during the formative years, the years of menstrual blood, there is conflict. Janey looked at Bethany, and then she bit down and kissed her sweetly on the mouth, softly and with feeling. The kiss wasn't passionate. It wasn't traitorous like Judas. It was forgiveness-oriented. It asked, nay, it begged Bethany to forgive her. It felt good on Bethany's mouth. It was the first time that Janey had ever done that, and Bethany felt tears come in her eyes. Janey had accepted Bethany as a complete woman, an acceptable human being now, and not a sinner. "Thank you," she muttered. "Don't leave me, Beth," said Janey. "I need you. I know that. You are my only family, and I don't want to die like my mother did, alone." Bethany wouldn't understand it until later, when she would worry a little about this. But this wasn't like Janey at all. This was like an act that she was doing for a role. And Bethany knew which role it was. What woman was as caring and as kind as this? Rachel Blackwelder. Bethany would sit in the tub later, a wine glass full of Cabernet Sauvignon and a rare Sinsemilla marijuana joint in her fingers, and she would think, sure, this was Rachel coming out in Janey. The transformation of getting into character was happening. That transformation never failed to baffle Bethany. She'd seen it before in roles that Janey would play. Janey did try to become the person she played, and never had Bethany seen Janey take to a role so hotly before. She hardly knew anything about Rachel, and that was the confusing part. If Janey had read the novel and had fallen in love with the idea of Rachel, then Bethany could see this about-face that Janey was doing on her behalf. But as far as Bethany knew, all that Janey understood of Rachel Blackwelder's character was what Bethany had told her, and that was precious little. No, something else was happening here. It was as though Rachel had the power to assume Janey, rather than Janey assuming Rachel. Rachel becoming Janey. And Bethany knew who would win. Rachel would win. Rachel was the strongest of the two people, and Rachel did not even exist. Man, thought Bethany, dragging deeply on her joint, and washing the rope taste down with a swallow of red wine. I sound just like Janey in her art-fart acting crap. Rachel assuming Janey indeed. Still, Bethany felt like something was working. She felt like thanking someone for making Janey a little bit more considerate. If only she had Rachel to thank. "Thank you, Rachel Blackwelder," toasted Bethany in the silence of the tub, as she raised her glass and finished off her wine. She was serious, too. She did not giggle afterwards as she wiped her mouth on the back of her wrist. Chapter 4. Leanne started her new job that evening as she readied herself to go to work. She felt a tingle of excitement run through her. She nervously licked at her lips and kept applying deodorant under each arm, forgetting each time that she had already applied it to herself. She had spent the afternoon in the bathroom naked, lying in the hot tub of water. She had not attended classes that day, and had felt a sort of little girl wickedness for it. It was actually fun to play hooky once in a while. All her professors would do is simply ask her if she was feeling better when they saw her again, and that would be the end of it. Oh, she studied assignments a week ahead of time, and would be more than ready for the test on Friday, should Jack Fightmaster decide to give it to his class. But today had been a day for fantasizing, and she had done plenty of that. Now, as she stood before the bathroom mirror, trying to concentrate on her makeup, she felt weak with self-induced satiety. Oh, what an afternoon in the tub could do for a girl, she smiled sweetly to herself. Oh, the pleasures of being alone. I've got a good job now, Mama, she whispered to the mirror as she applied her lipstick. I want you to know that. She was standing there, totally naked. And I still am, Mama, she said, enjoying how it felt to say that. I'm a little innocent girl, Mama. Down there I'm still a virgin. She smiled and kissed her lips together and smoothed out the peach lipstick to cover her mouth entirely. Perfect. Her eyeliner was also perfect, and she looked great. It did not dawn on Leanne that she was getting all dressed up to go and sit in a small room all night and stare at a camera. No, Leanne was getting dressed up to tour the houses of the stars. One star, in fact, in particular. Miss Knight's place. She said, sniffing, and applying a Q-tip to her left ear, removing the waxy build-up. I will look over everything in her home so I can study the person that she is and become just like her. I want to be Janie Knight. I will pretend I am her, she whispered. She left the room after unplugging her curling iron, and she went to her own small closet to get dressed. Later that night, after she had started working, she sat back and rubbed her eyes. She had not yet cracked her school books. She had been too intrigued with all the stars' homes. The girl that she had relieved at 7 p.m., an obese girl named Hannah, had smiled at her as she had seen her coming through the doorway. You're early, Hannah told her, placing her paperback book down on the desk, pages splaying against the tabletop. The bus was early, said Leanne. I have to get here when they do. I'm Leanne. Hannah, said the obese girl, moving to shake hands. There was an enormous duffel bag in the corner, and Leanne could tell it was stuffed with books and food, enough to get Hannah through a shift, at least. Did you see anything of note tonight? Asked Leanne as she moved to place her own little ditty bag down where it would not be in the way. Stallone's got a new statue, she said off the cuff. I don't like it. It's too rich. You'll see it. It's the only thing in his den that looks to be out of place. Leanne smiled. This was a weird job for sure, gazing into the stars' homes. The voyeur in Leanne was beginning to get excited. You're all dolled up tonight, said Hannah, and Leanne felt sort of strange as the girl eyed her up. For a moment Leanne felt like a dish of some untasted ice cream that Hannah was appreciating. I enjoy dressing well, said Leanne, in her most cosmopolitan magazine comeback. A little tinge of fear went through her as she judged Hannah's reaction. I know, said Hannah sensually. It shows, doll. The woman began to remind Leanne of Roseanne Barr. Her way and her manner were purposely brusque, to hide the fact that she was enormous. She was good because Leanne was afraid to say anything back, for fear of what she might get in a stinging reply. Here, said Hannah, handing Leanne her paperback. Enjoy this a while. It's one of my favorites. The book's title was Fantasies for the Solitary, a Study. Leanne had never seen the book before, and she was particularly well versed in all of the bookstore offerings. She quizzically looked at it, and then back up at Hannah. Hannah had risen ponderously to her feet and had snatched her duffel bag out of the corner, like Godzilla snatching up a skyscraper. What's it about? Asked Leanne innocently. You'll see, said Hannah. You're a reader. I can tell. You're alone a lot, too. I can tell that. You took this job, didn't you? Sure. You'll like that once it gets going. Give it a chance, though. I'll be seeing you. She started her ponderous shuffling towards the door and opened it. She turned around and smiled, once more. "Nice to meet you. Give the book a couple of chapters and then decide if it's for you or not." She smiled once again and left. Leanne signed on and started looking through the stars' homes almost immediately. An hour later, she had still not worked up to Janie Knight's place. She was saving it as a tantalizing treat. Here, with no Mr. Rosen to watch her, she would enjoy the view all to herself. Oh, yes, she would. She finally did look into Janie's place, and as she did so, focusing her imager to bring in the brightest clarity, she became lost in the woman's house. There was nothing out of place in any room. They had apparently cleaned up well before they had left for Pennsylvania. The bathroom was spotless, and Leanne had an awful vision of Janie being allowed to see in her bathroom in its present condition. Lying in shambles as it was, her tiny lotion tubes and Vaseline jars everywhere, and there were all those sample-size shampoos and cream rinses that she collected each week at the supermarket. There were wet towels left to molder, half hung up on the shower curtain rack. There were wet spots on the floor from her bathing, and at least 3 worn pairs of Leanne's panties, musky with her scent, lying along the edge of the tub. She had not washed, nor even picked up, in over a week. Shame entered her as she saw how nice Janie's place looked. Switching cameras, she wandered visually down Janie Knight's long upstairs hallway, seeing the paintings that hung along the walls on each side. There were all these Steve Hanks prints, strategically placed above doorways and along narrow portions of the walls. That painter liked to do narrow scenes like that, doing paintings that looked like they measured about 4 feet long and about 7 inches high. Other smaller prints were just the opposite. They were 4 feet tall and 7 or so inches wide, purposely designed for these off-the-wall areas over doorways and between them. She saw the nice women depicted in the scenes. The painting In Her Emotions was a terrific piece, and it was at the end of the passageway by the doorway into the master bedroom. Leanne herself loved this painter as much as Janie. All this guy had to do was paint a bit of shoulder over the edge of a bed, and bam, instant sensuality. The beauty of it was, the part that turned her on wasn't certain. Was it the nice overall effect, or was it subliminal? All of his paintings were of sensual women, clothed most of them. But what made them so nice? So sensual. They looked as if they had either moved or were about ready to move at any moment. Had Leanne studied art, she would have been aware of the technique that Steve Hanks used, of photographing his models in uncomfortable positions to give the impression of movement in the finished still painting. Leanne, however, would never know that. She whisked down the hallway and switched off into the bedroom, using the lens to see in there. The controls were easy enough. They were just beneath her viewing screen, and they consisted of a joystick embedded into the console, a series of great colored buttons lighted and numbered 1 through 9, and a series of other buttons labeled A through J. The idea was simple. Buttons 1 through 9 selected the property of the client in question. To access client number 11, all she had to do was push 1 twice. That was Janie's access, in fact. 11. By pushing 1-1, the interior of the house where Janie Knight resided came into view, and unless Janie defeated the camera from inside her home, Leanne could see anything she wanted to. Buttons A through J decided which of the cameras within a certain home would be accessed. Usually they started in the kitchen, and then through the open living areas, working their way up to the more private dwellings, such as bedroom and bath. If more than 10 cameras were on location, AA would be used to access the 11th camera, instead of a K button, which her console did not display. Tens were the rule, as Mr. Rosen had patiently explained to her. That way, in an emergency, you might chase a fugitive through the house without getting tangled up in an entire board of lighted panels. Once your fingers went 10 buttons down, you knew to come back and start over again. It made sense to Rosen, and Leanne had nodded like she understood the logic as well as the procedure. There was a button at the end of each of the rows of buttons that read Scan in a lighted area. Using Scan, she could whip through any number of house locations, or even any number of cameras on any one location, to get to the desired point. Scan was great. There was a small digital screen in the bottom area of the picture that read something like 3-F if the operator was on location 3 using the F camera within the house. That too was handy in case Leanne had to go pee, which she frequently did, and she forgot where she had been scanning last. Just look at the little digital screen to see where you were. It was a wonderful system, she had to admit, all of it brand new, and all of it had that slightly electronic-smelling newness that stores out at the mall had just after they had been open for business. Leanne liked that smell a lot. She fiddled with her joystick and spun a 360-degree view in Janie's private bedroom. Aha! So she isn't so neat after all, is she? Leanne was triumphant. Oh, poor Janie! A pair of panties lay beside the bed where they had been pulled off and flung. A pair of dirty panties in Janie's bedroom. Well, spank her tail for that. Ha ha! How many times had Leanne's mother popped her on the behind for that very same thing? Playful, yes, but seriously intended to change the habit. When you crawl into bed at night, young lady, you don't whip off your underpants and throw them down beside the bed like that. There was never any talk about why she was taking her underwear off at night and throwing them down by the side of the bed, just to stop it. Leanne had always wondered, was this her mother's subliminal prohibition for the act? Her mother didn't forbid her sleeping naked from the waist down, nor did she mind her sleeping naked at all. At least, she never said anything. Then again, she'd never seen her do it, either. Was that reprimand for tossing her underpants by the bed a warning not to do it because of what would follow? Leanne wondered a lot about that, but she never did anything so stupid as to take her mother aside and ask if she could, touch it. Down there. That would have really been stupid of her. To admit that she wanted to touch it would have been a bad enough thing. But God, what if the answer was no? That would have been tragic, for a mother like Leanne would have spied on her night and day to enforce the no decision to the fullest extent of the law. So Leanne had never gotten an answer from her mother on that. Later, she discovered she didn't need her mother's answer at all. But staring at Janie's black underpants as they were kicked almost half under the corner of the bedspread, Leanne remembered doing that herself. A fear would go through her about 9 a.m. in science class, when she'd suddenly remember she might not have picked up her underwear from the night before. Mother was home all the time in those days, and she washed constantly when the maid wasn't there. Leanne's room was rifled thoroughly in her absence as her mother looked for any evidence of anything in her daughter's room. That was standard procedure in the Ashley household. When you weren't in your cell, you got your rack shook down. Contraband check. Just like in the movies of prisons Leanne would go to see. Shake 'em down, boss man. Check those racks for contraband and make a case on the man. An alarm went off. Uh-oh. Leanne wasn't ready for this. Not now. The screen flashed 5//B, and then it went bright red, showing the scene for 5B. It was the John Broler place out on Mulholland. He was a producer and had star alarms in his home. "It's all right," yelled a man as Leanne switched the lens to see him. "I was just coming home." "State your name," said Leanne, reading from her emergency notes. "State your name and spell it, please." The man stood in the living room of his own home and told a complete stranger, through a camera lens, his name. Leanne would giggle over this later. Big Brother really was reality, and Leanne Ashley was him. "My name is Broler," said the man, peering at the demanding eye of the lens. "John Broler, Brohler. I am home early. I forgot to throw the switch outside first to black box you guys. Sorry about that." "Give me the code, please, Mr. Broler," said Leanne coolly. The man sighed and tried to recall it. "Okay, wait. I know this. It's my wife's idea. Oh..." His face suddenly brightened up. "Sure," he said. "It's Poe. In her tomb by the sounding sea." Leanne waited for the computer to access what he had said in his voice print. It did, and gave her a green. She had not had to do anything but wait until he spoke, and the machine recorded it. That way, she didn't have to take her eyes off this supposed Mr. Broler, whom she did not know. "Thank you, Mr. Broler," she said, "and good night. Don't forget to engage your B1X check." "No, ma'am," he said, relief evident on his face. "I won't. Thank you, miss." Leanne watched him go out of sight. And in a few moments, the B1X check hit the screen, and a blackout went over the viewer. Leanne switched to another client to get out of the darkness. She jotted down on her daily log the following: B1X check Broler John 9:23 May 8, 1990. Confirmed by break-in status, resolved by green code, in her tomb by the sounding sea. End. Piece of cake, she smiled to herself, feeling better. She went back to 11J and continued staring around inside Janie's room. It was an expensively designed bedroom, and her taste in everything was Leanne's all the way. She was staring down at the stereo equipment that graced one end of the actress's quarters, a set of Macintosh rack equipment with subwoofer and twin satellite mid-ranges on either end of the wall. A beautiful set of equipment. Janie's CD collection was visible from the camera lens, and she gave the joystick extreme forward focus, twisting a small dial on the side that read Zoom in silver stamped lettering. Zoom, she thought. Get me close. I want to know what sort of music my lady likes to take to bed with her. The zoom got right up on the angled rack of CDs, and Leanne could read the legends on the ends of the squared boxes. Now in Zen by Robert Plant. Delicate Sound of Thunder, Pink Floyd. Solitude, Standing. Beethoven, the 9 Symphonies. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. The woman was clearly into Brits. Beethoven, huh? Heavy. Janie had her room done in a white look, with white, deep shag carpeting and an uncombed appearance. The bedspread was white and covered the waterbed completely, with its fluffy silken sheen. The walls were all stark white with paintings, and, in places, ceiling lights cast pastel hues against sections of the wall. This had the weird effect of making the room seem to be hued in different shades of pink and light lavender. Just a touch of these hues, however, for the walls were obviously the white of the rest of the room. Leanne finished her scan of the bedroom, noting the wide-screen television in one corner. How would it be, wondered Leanne, to lie in your own bed and see a theater screen movie? How would that be? She would be just happy to have a color set on the dresser and not the 12-inch black and white. Janie's movies weren't visible from her camera eye. Janie wouldn't have a copy of her own flicks in her archives anyway. Janie had told Oprah Winfrey that she didn't like to watch her own movies. Taking her break, Leanne thought about what Janie had told Oprah about herself. Leanne unpacked her PB&J sandwich, got her Coke out of her small cooling sock, and popped the top on it, sitting back to eat. "I don't like to watch myself," Janie had said when she had been on television that morning. "I think I look awful." "Oh, that's not true," Oprah had intoned. "Audience, you buy her tickets. Am I wrong, or does she look fantastic up there?" "No," said Janie, as the audience dutifully applauded like wind-up sets of yes people. I know I must look good or I wouldn't be in business. But I don't want to have to watch me. See, I don't like it. I was there, and I know it wasn't like the movie shows it. All I can think about are the cuts and the outtakes and the director's breath. All I can see and remember is how long it took them to get the thing right." Leanne ate in silence, enjoying herself immensely. $7 an hour for this? Yes, definitely. Yes. This was good. Leanne had to smile. "Now I know you're full of crap, Miss Knight," she said to herself, talking to Janie. "I know that bit about you not watching yourself is a lie, baby doll." Leanne had seen the mirror on Janie's ceiling above her bed. She was definitely into watching herself perform, maybe even solo. No little handheld mirror for you, you bad girl. No, a full-scale brothel's eye view of the goings-on in the bed below. That's more like it for you, Janie Knight, you bad, bad girl. Leanne was getting into dangerous waters, and she did not recognize it. She was beginning to enjoy the fruits of spying. This voyeurism was becoming somewhat addictive, and Leanne was enjoying the temptation immensely. She licked her lips, finished her sandwich, and went back to her monitor. She started going into other people's bedrooms after that, and she would be able, before that first shift was over with, to tell you the bathroom and bedroom of each of their clients by a mere glance at the monitor. She could tell you which client had left a wet rag in the sink, and who it was that liked to read on the commode. She could tell you who the smokers were by the ashtrays, and she could say which of her clients liked the occasional joint. Leanne had seen things that the other camera jockeys hardly saw at all. She had seen the mirror on the ceiling of Janie's bedroom. She had seen the whip in the Hollywood designer's closet, hanging coiled next to a black studded jacket. Harrison Hambrick was always thought to be a little queer anyway, but sick as well. Leanne felt the power from learning these things racing through her, and slowly, without realizing it, she was losing a little bit of respect for each of the people that she had spied upon. Not much, but a little bit. Enough to notice later. After it was all over with. After the break-ins. Leanne finally sat back and rubbed her eyes. She thought it should be near shift change when her relief walked into the outer chamber. Leanne smiled at the old worn star alarm card he showed her through the glass, and she buzzed him through the outer door. He walked in dragging his Playmate cooler, stuffed with whatever. "My name's Rogers," he said, shaking her hand. "Busy night?" "No," she said, smiling, getting up to leave. She could feel his eyes on her, and she didn't care for him from this first sight. "See you tonight," she said. "Bye," he said wistfully, as he buzzed her outside, almost as if he had wished she had stayed a while. She opened the buzzing door and disappeared into the darkness. She had a few hours to try and sleep before she would have to go to her 9 o'clock English Lit class. She would try to sleep, but her new job had excited her so much, she was wondering if she was going to get any sleep at all this night. She started the short walk to the bus stop, which was well lit and full of early morning people going someplace or other. Seeing them made Leanne feel comfortable. She was home long before sunup. Janey looked around the valley in Pennsylvania that they had chosen as Huntington Valley. Naturally, it was nowhere near the real Huntington Valley at all. That was all grown up and populated. There was nowhere to build this fake cemetery in the real Huntington Valley. No, they'd had to come here to do that. This place was nice, though. It was somebody or other's farm, and they had agreed to allow the film crews in here to film. The key grips, gaffers, and best boys were all out there now doing a most unpleasant task. They were picking up cow droppings with pitchforks that the farmer had loaned them. They were putting the meadow muffins, as the director had called them, into an old wagon. The farmer was tickled to get this done. He didn't have to do it himself now. The fertilizer would come in real handy, he told them. He had boarded his cattle elsewhere until they could finish filming here. "So this is Peaceful Valley," sighed Rachel within Janey. Janey Knight was standing in a field of fake tombstones, looking towards the roadway. The road was very much like Old 36, the old Welsh road. She overheard a continuity man telling another one all about it. The Abbey should be just up there in those trees. They were up there now, erecting the iron gates. Janey could see them from here, about a mile away. "The opening scene," said a cameraman to the director, standing behind her, "will be sequenced here. We simply pan out across the valley, and then towards the distant row of maples over there, then black out." "Then we have the Mustang shots?" asked a man standing behind them. "Yes," said the director. "Get the kits set up. We need to get Miss Knight in the car today, if at all possible. Then we can match the real car scenes to these close-up stills. Is our driver ready?" "Yeah," said a woman behind them. She was adjusting her own red wig and fixing her frontier dress accordingly. "Good," said the director. "Get that thing started if you can." The woman nodded, moving towards a strange-looking black car that used to be a Mustang. It had flares and appendages on it now that made it look a lot more futuristic than the pony car it had originally been. It read Rach 1 on the blue and gold Pennsylvania tag. Rach 1. The Mustang roared to life and sat vibrating. The traditional whoom 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 of the engine identified it as a Mustang 5-liter, if nothing else did. Janey's own father had always driven a V8 Tang ever since she had known the man. In those days the 5-liter was known as the Boss 302. He would never be without one, he had told everyone. Now his precious little actress daughter was going to get to drive one as well. Well, it would look like she was driving it anyway. The thing Janie would be sitting in looked like the cockpit of an airplane. There were adjustable panels and removable pieces to the thing, and camera lenses rolled and oscillated up around the seat, up front, so that it looked rather like an old gyroscope she had seen as a little girl. Wild, she thought. Box me up in that thing. They were setting up a screen around her that would be showing scenery moving past her while she drove her car along the roadway. "Janie!" yelled a familiar voice. "Come here, girl. I want you to meet little one. I want to introduce you to Charlotte Dance." Bethany came running up to her with a young girl in tow. She looked to be about 18, but could have been younger, probably 16. Janie looked down at the smiling girl, who had a gleam in her eye. "I always wanted to meet you, Miss Knight," said the girl, blushing furiously at the introduction. "I've seen all your movies and everything. I think you are just wonderful." Janie liked her right away. "Pleased to meet you, Charlotte," said Janie, taking her trembling hand. "I know we're going to get along just fine, you and me." Where was Drew Barrymore, wondered Janie for a moment. She was going to be Charlotte, wasn't she? The part had been written for her. Maybe she was busy elsewhere. She probably just turned it down. "That's her real name, you know," chimed Bethany, excited enough to pee on herself. "Her name really is Charlotte. Charlotte McGuire." Charlotte blushed furiously at this. Janie could have lit a cigarette off the girl's forehead, which reminded her she needed a smoke. "Charlotte, huh?" asked Janie. "That's very pretty." If it was possible, Charlotte blushed even deeper. Janie was afraid that Charlotte might spontaneously combust if she didn't ease up a bit. "I hope that I might be as good as Drew Barrymore would have been," said the girl, her color fading down to a dull pink roar. "I know she was asked first." "I'm sure you're that good," thought Janie to herself. "You want the part bad enough, contrary to what they teach you in drama school. That's 3/4 of any actress right there, wanting it." But Janie didn't tell Charlotte this. She just thought it. "You're going to be fine, Princess," said Janie, unaware that that was Rachel's pet name for Charlotte in Peaceful Valley. Charlotte accepted it as a compliment in character and smiled at Janie. To be called a princess was to be accepted by the leading lady, and that was definite. Charlotte immediately felt more at ease around the great Janie Knight. She began to feel more like Charlotte Dance around Rachel Blackwelder, the thing they had all come here to do. "I thank you for that," said Charlotte in a low voice, looking at Bethany with the same gratitude. Bethany fairly beamed with happiness. "Janie means it," said Bethany, smiling at the girl. "She really does." Janie had turned away to watch the Mustang Equus as it roared off down the road. A filming truck was chasing it, catching the car on film, while the stunt double woman did the Rachel in motion footage for the film. "She likes you," Bethany whispered to the rising young hopeful that was the young girl. "This is going to be good for your career, Charlotte." Charlotte bounced excitedly from one foot to the other, and Bethany could not help but think of Charlotte Dance. She did look more like Charlotte Dance than the actress Drew Barrymore. The descriptions in the novel had Miss Dance favoring this girl more than any Bethany had ever seen. Casting had done a terrific job this time. "All right," yelled a voice. "Ladies, we need you babes down here. I got to get you guys set up now." It was the coordinator, a rough-looking woman named Margot. She looked like a man for all intents and purposes, and Bethany feared that someone would tell her about Bethany's former preferences. Margot could make a play for Bethany if that were the case. She hoped and prayed nobody would tell her, for Bethany knew that if this woman Margot wasn't one, she was missing a heck of a chance. "I think I'll go powder my nose," whispered Bethany to Janey, who doubled over in quiet laughter. She understood why, and everything. "I don't blame you, Beth," said Janey. "See you, babe." They were getting along ever so much better since Rachel had had her talk with Janey that afternoon, a week ago. Bethany had heard it, and while she'd never tell Janey, she heard it all. Now as Bethany walked quickly back down the rise to the makeup trailers gathered below them like covered wagons in a prairie field, she recalled the conversation of Janey and Rachel that Bethany had heard through the door of Janey's bedroom. Janey had been talking to herself and hadn't known it. She had been both voices, and hearing Janey speaking as Rachel had chilled Bethany a bit. That smoky, honeyed-over voice that was supposed to be Rachel's was scary, even though it was taking Bethany's side of the argument. That honeyed-over voice so reminiscent of a Lauren Bacall. "You couldn't smack your butt with both hands were it not for Bethany Bishop," Bethany had heard Rachel saying through the door. Maybe that was true. Maybe. But if Janey was afraid of getting stuck in one of her roles and not being able to get back to being Janey Knight again, then God let it be Rachel Blackwelder that she becomes. "Please," mumbled Bethany as she reached the trailer door marked Night. "Please let it be Rachel." Leanne worked for the Star Alarm Company for the next few weeks without incident. She hadn't seen Hannah anymore because the next night Hannah had taken her vacation and had been in New England at her parents' place visiting. Leanne had been replacing a sweet young airhead named Tara Linder when she would report to work at night. And poor Tara couldn't seem to understand why she was failing her psychology course at the college. After all, she was reading the assignments and doing the essays well enough. "But when I get on the test," she said, "I just look out the window and it escapes me. I have test shock fright. I know, but still, they should be able to pass me without all the aura and mystery of testing, don't you think, Leanne?" Leanne had quietly told her that she didn't know. Poor Tara. Who did she think she was? Didn't Tara understand that test results were the only way a college had of evaluating performance? Such mindless, lobotomized little liberals like Tara Linder. Leanne gave Tara about as much conversation as she had given Rogers when he would come on his shift. He was about to ask her out, she feared, and so for a couple of nights, when she was sure no one would see her, she had gone to work looking scuzzy. Scuzzy for Leanne meant no perfume and no makeup. She thought it was the perfect unattraction ploy. It had seemed to work perfectly. He was suspecting that maybe she wasn't as wrapped tightly as he had thought. He had stopped with all the overly familiar chit-chat. He must have decided that Leanne was not as stable and not worth his macho time, maybe. She breathed a sigh of relief now to think about it. Strange, she thought. Here I want to get laid, and all I do is drive men away. I wonder, would I do the same thing to Robert Redford if he came to work here? The thoughts of that bothered her a little bit. She enjoyed her job more after the spring term let out. Most people were all planning to go to the beach and get burnt, drunk, pissed, and pregnant, but not her. Not Leanne Ashley. She was looking forward to the campus town being closed for the biggest part of the summer. She was looking forward to reading something besides the Scarlet Letter and Moby Dick. "Spare me," she cried in her spirit. "I want to read something that has no irony, no foreshadowing, no Greek geeky tragedy nonsense. I am so sick of it all." She had finished The Pursuit of Sundown a week earlier and was dying for another read. She should have graduated in another week, and she would do that. She would go through the ceremony, get her honors degree, and graduate. But she wasn't yet ready to go back home and job hunt. She had a job, and she was going to work it a while longer. "I'm surprised at you, Leanne," her mother had complained. "I thought that you wanted to get a good job right away so you could get married. I had no idea that you wanted to quit life for a couple of months, like all the college crap-outs do. You know, they never go back to class again. They just lay and smoke pot and play with themselves and each other." "Mom," Leanne had tried to explain, "I have graduated. I'm out. There's no way I can be a crap-out. I have the sheepskin." Leanne, for the first time in her life, was getting sick of her silly mother. She felt her eyes rolling up a lot lately when she would talk to her on the phone. "There's still no reason for you to stop your life now that it is going so well. You have no future doing, what is that thing? Star alarms. What on earth is that?" Leanne had foolishly told her. "Oh, young lady, that is sick. That's like being a peeping Tom. I won't hear of—" "Mom," Leanne had told her, "I'll see you and Dad at the ceremony. Please come. I want to see you both. But I'm staying here for a few months. I have a new apartment on High Street, and I have a lease until September 15th that I must honor. I will be here until then." "You moved off campus?" asked her mother, mortified. "Not very far away. Not far enough. The apartment is wonderful, though, and I'm very happy here. I'm making $7 an hour, Mom. I'm stuffing it all I can in the bank. I want a positive cash flow for a few days. I'm sick of being an impoverished bookworm. I will be home, and then you can plan my life for me." "We will never do that, Leanne," said her mother quietly. "Well, then I'll plan it. But I would like a break. I'm sick of driving myself every waking minute. Consider this the summer breaks I never took, for you do know I have never spring breaked anywhere. I went to summer school, and I've worked for years to get this degree. Let me breathe a little, all right?" The line was silent for an expensive amount of time. Finally, her mother spoke. "It's sick anyway, Leanne. Staring into people's houses when they aren't at home. It'll give a girl ideas. It'll make you start fantasizing and—" The line went cold with the unspoken deed. Leanne closed her eyes. "Yes, and that too, Mother," she thought. "Long before I ever heard of Star Alarm Company. A long time before that." "I still am, Mother," said Leanne quietly. "I'm still a virgin." "That's not what I'm talking about, girl," said her mother, "and you know it." "Yes, ma'am." "It's not right for you to be without a man any longer. You need one in your life or you'll get strange. The urge can be controlled just so long, and then—" Her mother exhaled forcefully into the receiver. "Oh, you're a big girl, Leanne, and you know your own body, I guess, but you'll have to be accountable for what you do, girl. I just can't be watching you from now on. Leanne held the phone away from her ear and let her mother's voice whine in the earpiece unheard. She knew what she was saying. She knew it by heart. Finally, she started listening again at the appropriate time. "So you be good, you hear me? I still love you, and we want you home with us where you belong. It's not good to stay out there too long. Your father and I never wanted you so far from us, but the opportunity—" Leanne felt her mind drift. Her mother had rambled on a few more minutes, and then she had mercifully hung up. Leanne had won for now, but the ceremony would be the telling tale. If she could survive her mother's attempts at getting her immediately into the job market, she would be allowed to stay in California a while longer. If not, then she would just have to go home and let Daddy pay her apartment off. She hated the thoughts of that. Her mother had been right. Leanne was now getting off watching the insides of other people's homes. It was a small addiction, but it was growing, and she couldn't help it. She liked it. She liked watching the small things people left behind, the marks of their lives. Mark Thomas McKinley, a producer, had come home early and had black-boxed the alarm, but had neglected to kill the camera assembly. He had X-checked, but he had not B1 terminated the lens. B1, Leanne understood, meant black out the screen. X-check stood for killing the audible voice system that they could communicate with at Star Alarms. Rogers had told Leanne all about it later. McKinley had brought this girl into his bedroom and had deflowered her right on the bed. "There was her virginity," said Rogers when he had told her. "I saw it all, Leanne. She squealed and moaned, and then there it was. He took her little butt good. He got in so big a hurry to have this little dolly that he didn't cut me out, and I got a bird's-eye view of all the proceedings." Leanne had shuddered at this explanation of a deflowering, because she was so in hopes that it didn't hurt modern girls like their mothers had complained. She would have liked to have seen this defloration herself, but maybe it was good that she hadn't seen it. "Oh, Leanne," Rogers had asked her coyly, "it's here if you want to see it." "What is where?" asked Leanne. "The video of the McKinley love scene, of course. I filmed it. I know how to do that, and I have it here in memory." "They'll find it," said Leanne conspiratorially. "They'll see it, and then you'll get fired or worse." He smiled and patted her arm. His touch was as cold as a snake's. "Not me, chickie," he said in his low voice. "I have it listed in the database. It's under training films, and it's so far back in memory they'll never access that many bits of information. The code is K112,300 if you want to see it. Just put it back when you're through with it." Leanne had snarled at him, and he had laughed at her as he left the building. Leanne had been tempted to watch it, for educational purposes, mind,